I'm Dr. Joseph M.T., Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai. This is the E-Pathshala project on religion and society, and we are in module 25. In this module, we are looking at the debate of secularism in India. Secularism is a word that is very widely debated and very widely talked about in India today, and as it has been for some years now. We look at this word and the practice of secularism and the debate surrounding it. We look at the origin of this word and its very different meanings in different geographical and cultural contexts, mainly the US, the Europe, and in India. We look at the different kind of shades of meaning that Indians have given to it, or Indian writers have given to it, or Indian political practitioners have given to it. We also look at the way that secularism has evolved as a practice, has evolved from post-independent time, especially in the 1950s, and then the way that this word was inserted as an amendment in the constitutions of India in 1976, and then we trace its kind of a contemporary relevance where there is a lot of debate going on whether this word should be there in the constitution or not. So in that sense, secularism as a word that has come, a practice that has come to India, and in the way that we have Indian kind of definitions to it and Indian kind of applications to it. This is what we are going to see in this module. Secularism debate in India. Secularism is indeed one of the greatest and most admired ideologies of our times, which has been equated with moral virtue as well as scientific temper. As indicated by every dictionary of Western European languages, it refers to the doctrine that rejects religion and religious considerations. The concept of secularism was coined by George Jacob Holyoake of England in 1851. Of course, the background to the emergence of the modern ideology of secularism is the conflict between reason and faith that showed up in the later Middle Ages in Western Europe. In common parlance, it was the conflict between the state and the church, the breakup of the Christendom, the age of reason and of enlightenment. By the second half of the 18th century, eventually proclaimed the ideology of secularism. In fact, scholars like Peter Berger have put forth the thesis that secularization is a gift of Christianity to humankind. Amongst the earlier advocates of this ideology, Spencer and Saint-Simon, Comte, Durkheim, Marx and Weber were prominent. Thus, the idea of secularism, often seen as a gift of Judeo-Christian tradition, was built into Western social theorist paradigms of modernization. The original usage of the term secular from the Latin secularis of Roman times refers to occasional celebrations. In Christian Latin, it referred to those living outside the regulations of the church, acquiring a negative connotation. However, by the early 19th century, the meaning of the term changed radically. Instead of differentiating the worldly from the religious, it vouched for the well-being of the human society without any sanctions from the supernatural. The negative connotation slowly gave way to a more positive one. It was in the 20th century, including the collapse of the Ottoman Empire at the World War I, a number of countries with significant ethnic, religious and cultural diversity attempted to keep the state and the public sphere separate from the private practice of the religion, thereby establishing secular states. The concept of secularism, the Indian context. Sarvadham Sambhava is the Indian version of secularism. In the Indian context, Thomas asserts that the concept of secularism as a political philosophy emerged in the national independence movement. Further, the conceptual understanding of secular state in Indian context comprises two tenets. Firstly, the fundamental civil right of religious liberty while safeguarding religious and cultural pluralism. And secondly, emphasis on the modern democratic ideals of freedom, equality and justice. Notwithstanding this, it should also be remembered that secularism in India does not look at religious communities as static, but rather as active and dynamic, and therefore the Indian secular state withheld with it the right to intervene on certain grounds in order to safeguard the democratic ideals. Clearly, this is unlike the USA's concept of secular state, which is the wall of separation as a complete non-interventionist. Whereas the concept of Indian secularism envisages a measure of secularization of the Indian society for the sake of forming a national community on common social ideals. In other words, it is a non-discriminatory projection of all religions. However, this attitude becomes impractical in a nation like ours where religion plays such an important role in almost everybody's life. The Indian conception of secularism only requires that there shall be no state religion and that the state shall treat all religions equally. In this context, as the state allows special intervention, it significantly differs from countries like USA and their understanding of secularism. In reality, it has been, however, often noted that the Indian state is often a helpless arbiter of competing claims of rival fundamentalist contentions. Of course, the reasons to be blamed for it range from lack of political will to vested interests of various political groups. Such situations are often attributed to two seemingly contradictory roles of the Indian state of intervention and non-intervention in the various religious matters for the purpose of social justice and equality. Its intervention is contemplated for the purpose of redefining the scope of religion, and non-intervention has been contemplated in order to make religious organization autonomous from state intervention, besides concerns for equality and individual liberty. However, there is still no consensus with reference to the existence of various personal laws based on religion. Particularly, the status of women is highly subordinated through these laws. Any attempt to rectify this meets with a lot of resistance. Even the modernized, secularized laws such as Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act 1956, and Hindu Succession Act 1956 are infused with certain religious elements. The term secular or secularism was not initially incorporated into the preamble of the Constitution in a written manner, although it existed in the minds and makers of the Indian Constitution right from the beginning, and it was thus assumed that the people would remain secular in their actions and thoughts. It was only in 1976, with the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution, that the word secular formally became an integral part of the preamble of our Constitution. Dr. Babasaheb B. R. Ambedkar, chairperson of the drafting committee, while speaking on the Hindu Code Bill in 1951 in Parliament, explained the secular concept as follows. The secular state does not mean that we shall not take into consideration the religious sentiments of the people. All that a secular state means is that this parliament shall not be competent to impose any particular religion upon the rest of the people. Thus, the meaning of the word secular was clearly expressed. However, our constitution does not build a wall of separation between state and religion. As the Indian Constitution does not conceive of a clear separation between religion and state, it leads to confusion and promotes bad blood among certain communities. One is confused to determine whether it is the intervention or non-intervention of the state when it imposes sweeping restrictions on freedom of speech and expression. For instance, the ban on Salman Rushdie's book was seen as an appeasement of Muslims. Babasaheb Ambedkar's riddles on Hinduism were held up owing to the Hindus protesting, etc. From these instances, one can see how the political leadership selectively appeases both the minority as well as majority fundamentalisms on various occasions. Bakshi calls for a serious reflection on the meaning of the word religion, where he asserts, do we qualify to understand the ideology, as Madan puts it, of religion as well as secularism? In other words, there should be clearer understanding and somewhat universal interpretation of religion so as to understand and interpret secularism in its specific Indian context. Various aspects of the debate. Considering the multi-religious and culturally diverse reality of the Indian society, secularism seems to be a difficult and problematic project. Therefore, with the rise of religious fundamentalism and cultural nationalism, the debate on secularism has become an overheated confrontation of contradictory perspectives. Secularism started posing as a question mark ever since Ram Janambhoomi Babri Masjid controversy started leading up to the Babri Masjid demolition on 6 December 1992 by Hindu communal fanatics. The incident clearly showed how powerful religion can be and thus generated a debate on the existing theories of secularism in India. Thus, many different strands of this debate became visible in the due course, with no proper long-term solution reached as yet. While secularism in India means equal respect to all religions, it should not mean equal encouragement to fundamentalisms of all communities or political parties. Today, secularism is under great threat in many countries, particularly India. There are multiple intervening forces at work at either to slow down or hamper the successful functioning of a secular state. Besides, apart from the possible incompatibility of the Western concept of secularism, within the non-Western cultures, there is yet another influential pressure strengthening non-secular elements, the geopolitics. For instance, the United States supported military assistance responsible for the rise of the Taliban, also supported by Pakistan. In India too we can see a strange combination of religious fundamentalism mixed with political conditions of the country that is often deliberately mistaken for nationalism. For instance, the Hindutva campaign spearheaded by Bharatiya Janata Party, Vishwa Hindu Parishad and others promote nationalism and Indianness through overemphasis on Hinduness. Such political and religious outfits give undue weightage to religious aspects, thereby intentionally neglecting other important aspects, thus exploiting people's religious sentiments for vested interests and resorting to linguistic regional religious identities, which leads to polarization among the people. One cannot deny that any situation in India can become volatile considering the violent turn many trivial incidents take, particularly when one looks at the multiple incidents of communal violence between the two main religious communities. The term Hindu, however, cannot be an umbrella term to cover all those who call themselves or rather are identified by other Hindu. Hinduism is indeed a conglomeration of different types of beliefs, theistic, atheistic and practices, many of which are at variance with one another. However, it is quite constraining and narrow-minded to think of secularism only in the terms of Hindu-Muslim question. This overemphasis on the inter-religious aspects of this passive secularism, however, shows that it is the Hindu community displaying concessional attitude towards other communities as clearly highlighted in the recent Hindu revivalist tendencies. For instance, RSS chief Mohan Bhagavat's controversial statement about India being a Hindu nation with Hindutva as its identity. But this kind of overemphasis can be very misleading as one is forced to ignore aspects other than interreligious questions. Instead of this unidimensional passive secularism, multidimensional secularization process is usually suggested as an apt way of dealing with problems caused by overemphasis on the Hindu-Muslim issues. Secularism becomes highly debatable in the Indian context when one considers the Western origins, thus ignoring its historical specificity. Undeniably, the debate on secularism gets structured by the historical preponderance in the Indian academia of the kind of critiques of the West, modernity and science. It is then argued that the real debate of secularism rarely touches the actual secular practices of the Indian state, what secularism means to ordinary people in India, how it is practiced on the ground and so on. In fact, these are very important questions one must attempt to answer so as not to ignore its actual practical conditions that exist in day-to-day real situations. Mohanty differentiates between hegemonic secularism and democratic secularism. In India, he asserts the state resorts to hegemonic kind of secularism through strengthening their grip on power. It only serves the interests of the ruling class by manipulating various religious groups, Sarvadharma Sambhava, or the potentiality of Hinduism to accommodate all religions, that is, a notion of multi-religious harmony, actually contributes to the continued predominance of Hindu religion in society and the state. It is indeed a monolithic view of Indian tradition as Hindu tradition. Such a glorification of Indian tradition by ignoring the contradictions and multi-stranded character only to build an alternative theory may also contribute to a trend of Hinduization of the state. Democratic secularism, on the other hand, is part of a wider struggle against the socio-political domination. It is a democratic struggle against class, caste and ethnic domination. This implies that the reason and rationality are important in assessing the role played by religious institutions in socio-political domains of the society. India is currently struggling to negotiate between its secular doctrine and the communal forces that are dividing the nation. This brings us back to the aforementioned ongoing debate. Whether is India really practicing secularism as a policy as well as an ideology, or is secularism simply camouflaging the political appeasement done for communal vote banks? Although there are many such issues, a few are particularly grave, forcing us to rethink our understanding of the term secularism. These issues are as follows. First, the issue of certain sections demanding statehood and separation on the religious, ethnic and linguistic basis, like the demand for Gorkhaland, Khalistan, etc. The situation in the northeast is no better, or rather worse, with constant ethnic strife, like the ongoing Assam border issues. Secondly, the Kashmir problem, where we do not see any deliberate political will to solve the issue. Third, disharmony between Hindus and Muslims, which aggravated since Babri Masjid demolition. In fact, communalism is one of the biggest threats to secularism in India. This sole problem has the potential of discarding and jeopardizing the idea of secularism altogether. Fourth, the caste politics or caste-based political parties and associations are not working in the direction of eradication of castes, but instead promoting caste differences, adding fuel to the discrimination. This problem also directly connects the contentious issue of positive discrimination, that is, the reservation policy. Fifthly, highly controversial debate surrounding Uniform Civil Code, beginning almost with the Shah Bano case in 1985. In Indian secularism, there exists a paradox. Despite being modernized at one level, the Indian society is still capable of challenging the very basis of loyalties which are based on primordial ties. So although we openly present a highly modernized and scientific outlook towards everyday problems, there are powerful contexts in which the primordial traditional ties and identities become extremely decisive and violent, negating all otherwise valid scientific and logical arguments. A careful inspection of school textbooks, leaving aside other multiple problems that these textbooks have, will reveal how the history is manipulated. Knowledge and power are two highly problematic domains. Persons holding power are known to subjugate the dissemination of knowledge for their various vested interests. Certain textbooks are known to glorify the religious and historical heroes of particular communities, that is, promoting communal agenda in education through manipulating history. The result is that children of different communities do not have a common view of the history of our country. Bipin Chandra, renowned historian, is also believed to have said that secular nationalism in India experienced before independence was a far cry from the kind of India that we have been witnessing today. Nanda, while offering a comparative study of secularism in India and US, attributes its failure to the absence of secular cultures and also the inadequate secularization of cultural common sense. She points out to how, in both countries, there has been a visibly steady merger of the majority religion with the affairs of the state, and therefore she asserts that the great wall of separation between the church and the state could not keep the two apart in the US. Neither has the great Indian wheel of law model of secularism prevented the rise of an intolerant variety of Hindu nationalism. In similar vein, Romila Thapar, while asserting that the idea of secularism is not aligned to the Indian society, tries to examine how secularism has been imposed as an ideology without having evolved as a process of secularization of Indian society, which is linked to the inclusive nationalism, thereby creating a modernized nation-state. Based on her assertion, in India, we can see two popular approaches on the relationship between religion and secularism. One, arguing that secularism confronts religion, leading to a rupture. The other defines secularism as coexistence of all religions with equal respect for all. However, this does not represent the Indian reality to its fullest, as again its meaning is drawn on the medieval European context. A.B. Shah argues that the Indian state has half-hearted attitude towards secularism and looks at the Indian society itself being anti-secular when it comes to the dealings with two major communities, Hindus and Muslims, which are equally skeptical of each other. The composite Indian culture is being destroyed by the various types of revivalism, narrow religious concerns and invocation of primordial loyalties. Although the state does not involve itself in any religious matters unless in specific cases with provisions in place, yet many political parties are formed on the communal, religious and caste basis that often seek to work against the communal harmony of the nation. The issue of secularism cannot be treated in isolation as it is linked to the nature of the state. Therefore, for proper understanding of the functioning of secularism, it is important to examine how those who control property relations handle the issues of secularism. This is because there is a difference between the dominant elite and the masses at large in the approach to the problem of secularism. In order to perpetuate their control, the elites manipulate religious sentiments and symbols, whereas the situation at the level of the masses need not be as bad as it appears from the elite's level. To further complicate the situation, in India, caste, religion and politics all overlap miserably. Caste and religion form communities that operate between individual and society as they provide a sense of identity to its members. Conclusion, Module 25. In this module has been basically about secularism, and secularism, as we know, is very clearly related and connected to religion. In the Indian context, what does secularism mean, and what are the ways in which we Indians have looked at secularism and practiced secularism? And these different shades of meaning and these different shades of understanding and practice is something that we have looked at in this module. Thank you.